day their father died. His brother took everything from him. He thought it was over, until he found what he didn't know existed. And that's when everything changed. Watch till the end to know how everything unfolded.
On a cold October morning in Baltimore, 32-year-old Darius Holloway stood alone outside his late father's brownstone, staring at the polished black door that had once meant safety. The brass numbers 117 gleamed under weak sunlight, untouched since the funeral 2 weeks earlier. He adjusted the collar of his coat, exhaling slowly. "You ready for this?" his cousin Renee asked softly behind him. Darius didn't turn. "No," he said. "But I don't get a choice." Inside that house were memories, his father's laughter, the smell of bourbon and cedar, the quiet lessons about trust and survival. But today wasn't about memories. Today was about the will. About answers. About something that had been eating at him since the lawyer's call. His younger brother Marcus Holloway had already gone inside. That alone told Darius everything he needed to know. Marcus never showed up early unless there was something to gain. As Darius pushed the door open, the familiar creak echoed like a warning. The living room was full, relatives, hushed voices, tension thick enough to choke on. And there, standing near the fireplace in a tailored gray suit, was Marcus. Composed. Smiling. Too calm. Too composed. "Big bro," Marcus said, his voice smooth as polished steel. "Took you long enough." Darius stared at him, something cold settling in his chest. "Yeah," he replied quietly. "Traffic." But it wasn't traffic. It was instinct. Something deep inside him had been screaming all morning. Warning him. Telling him that whatever waited in this room wasn't going to be simple. And as their father's attorney cleared his throat and opened the folder in his hands, Darius realized something else. This wasn't just a reading of a will. This was the beginning of something much darker. The attorney, a thin man named Leonard Price, adjusted his glasses and began reading in a steady, practiced tone. "This is the last will and testament of Elijah Holloway." The room fell into a suffocating silence. Darius folded his arms, his eyes never leaving Marcus. His brother didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Just stood there like he already knew how this would end. And that was the first crack. Because their father had always been unpredictable but never unfair. "To my eldest son Darius Holloway," Leonard paused, glancing up briefly. Darius felt his pulse spike. "I leave my personal effects and a sum of $20,000. The words hit like a dull hammer. Around the room murmurs started. Confusion. But Darius didn't move. Didn't speak. But inside something shifted violently. That was it. After everything? After years of loyalty, sacrifice, showing up when Marcus disappeared, fixing what Marcus broke? $20,000 and some old belongings? Leonard continued. "To my youngest son Marcus Holloway, I leave the brownstone property, all associated financial accounts, and controlling interest in Holloway Logistics." This time the room erupted. Voices overlapped. Someone whispered, "That can't be right." But Marcus smiled. Slow. Satisfied. Like a man who had just watched a plan unfold perfectly. Darius finally spoke, his voice low and controlled. "Say that again." Leonard cleared his throat. "The majority of the estate is awarded to Marcus Holloway." Silence followed. Heavy. Crushing. Darius turned to his brother. "You knew." It wasn't a question. Marcus shrugged lightly. "I had a feeling." A feeling. Darius let out a short, humorless laugh. "Nah," he said, stepping closer. "That isn't a feeling. That's preparation." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, something old and buried surfaced between them. Something sharp. Dangerous. And for the first time since their father died, Darius realized he wasn't just grieving. He was being played. "Let's not turn this into a scene," Marcus said calmly, adjusting his cufflinks as if the room hadn't just tilted off its axis. But Darius wasn't hearing him anymore. His mind was racing backwards, sideways, searching for anything that made sense. Their father had always said one thing clearly: fair doesn't mean equal, but it sure as hell isn't blind. And this felt blind. No worse. This felt deliberate. "You've been talking to him," Darius said slowly, stepping closer. "Before he died." Marcus tilted his head slightly, feigning innocence. "We all talked to him, Darius. Not like this." His voice hardened. Not enough to walk away with everything. The tension in the room thickened. Renee stepped forward cautiously. Darius, maybe we should. No, he cut her off. I need him to answer me. Marcus sighed like this was all just inconvenience. Look, man. Dad made his choices. Maybe you weren't who he thought you were. That hit deeper than anything else. Darius felt it land in his chest, heavy and precise. Watch your mouth, he said quietly. Marcus smiled again, but this time it wasn't warm. It was sharp. Calculated. Or what? He asked. You going to do something about it? For a split second the room held its breath. Darius stepped back instead. Not out of fear but control. He looked at the attorney. Is there anything else? Leonard hesitated. No, that concludes the will. Darius nodded slowly. Good. Then he turned back to Marcus, his expression unreadable now. Calm. Too calm. Enjoy it, he said. All of it. Marcus chuckled lightly. Trust me, he replied. I will. But as Darius walked toward the door, something else echoed in his mind, his father's voice, low and deliberate from months ago. If anything ever feels off, check the things I didn't say out loud. Suddenly, Darius realized something critical. His father never left things unfinished. That night, Darius sat alone in his apartment, the city lights of Baltimore flickering through half-closed blinds like restless thoughts. The envelope sat untouched on the table in front of him, the one labeled personal effects. He had almost ignored it. Almost. But something about his father's voice wouldn't let him. Check what I didn't say out loud. The words repeated in his head like a warning. He leaned forward, finally opening the envelope. Inside were a few items. An old wristwatch, a faded photograph, and a small key taped to the back of a folded note. Darius frowned, unfolding the paper slowly. It wasn't long. Just one sentence, written in his father's unmistakable handwriting. Locker 317. Trust no one, not even blood. Darius sat back, his heartbeat picking up again. Locker? What locker? And why the warning? He picked up the key, turning it in his fingers. This wasn't random. His father didn't deal in randomness. Everything had purpose. Everything had layers. Which meant, whatever Marcus got, wasn't the whole story. Darius grabbed his coat, moving quickly now. He didn't know exactly what he was walking into, but he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not even close. And somewhere, hidden behind whatever Marcus thought he had won, was the truth his father couldn't say out loud. The kind of truth that didn't belong in a will. The kind of truth you had to earn. As he stepped out into the night, the cold air hit his face sharply, but it cleared his mind. For the first time since the reading, Darius felt something shift. Not grief. Not anger. Something sharper. Focus. And whatever waited behind locker 317 was about to change everything. The storage facility sat on the edge of the harbor, a concrete structure surrounded by rusted fencing and flickering security lights that barely held back the darkness. Darius pulled his car into the gravel lot, engine idling for a moment as he studied the place. It felt wrong already. Too quiet. Too forgotten. Exactly the kind of place his father would choose if he wanted something hidden in plain sight. He stepped out, the cold wind cutting through his coat, and made his way to the entrance. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale, sterile glow over endless rows of lockers. A tired-looking clerk glanced up briefly. Unit number? He asked. 317, Darius replied. The man nodded, barely interested, and pointed down the hallway. Back row. Left side. Darius walked slowly, each step echoing louder than it should have. His grip tightened around the small key as he counted the numbers. 311. 330. 315. Then he stopped. Locker 317. It looked like any other. Plain. Gray. Forgettable. But his pulse said otherwise. He crouched slightly, inserting the key. For a moment he hesitated. Then he turned it. The lock clicked open with a sharp sound that seemed too loud for the empty corridor. He lifted the door. Inside wasn't what he expected. No stacks of cash. No obvious documents. Just a single black duffel bag sitting neatly in the center. Darius stared at it, his instincts flaring again. This wasn't random. This was staged. He reached in slowly, unzipping the bag with careful precision. Inside were folders. Hard drives. A thick envelope labeled in bold marker. If Marcus wins, open this. Darius froze. His father knew. Not suspected. Knew. And whatever was inside that bag wasn't just inheritance. It was insurance. Darius carried the duffel bag back to his apartment like it contained something alive. Every step felt heavier, more deliberate, as if the weight inside wasn't just physical, it was truth waiting to surface. Once inside, he locked the door, closed the blinds, and placed the bag carefully on the table. His hands were steady, but his breathing wasn't. He opened the envelope first. Inside was a letter. He recognized the handwriting instantly. Darius, it began. If you're reading this, then Marcus did exactly what I feared. Darius swallowed hard, eyes scanning faster now. I didn't raise you boys to turn against each other. But I wasn't blind. Marcus has been moving behind my back for years. Quiet. Patient. Dangerous. Darius felt his chest tighten. He's been siphoning money from Holloway Logistics through shell accounts. I couldn't prove it legally without destroying the company, but I documented everything. Darius dropped into the chair behind him. No, he whispered. In this bag you'll find records, transaction trails, names, and the truth Marcus buried. I didn't expose him while I was alive because I needed to see how far he'd go. Now I know. The letter ended with one final line. What you do with this defines who you are. Silence filled the room. Heavy, unforgiving. Darius stared at the bag, then slowly opened one of the folders. Bank statements. Offshore accounts. Signatures. Marcus's name everywhere. Not rumors. Not suspicions. Evidence. Cold and undeniable. Darius leaned back, running a hand over his face. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. This was betrayal at a level he hadn't even imagined. His brother hadn't just taken everything. He'd stolen it long before their father died. No. Darius had something Marcus didn't know existed. Proof. And for the first time since the will reading, Darius understood the game. And more importantly, how to win it. Morning came slowly, but Darius hadn't slept. The evidence lay spread across his table like pieces of a puzzle that had already been solved. He just hadn't seen it before. Every document pointed to the same truth. Marcus hadn't just manipulated their father. He had been draining the company quietly for years, building a financial shadow no one noticed. You really went that far, Darius muttered under his breath. His phone buzzed suddenly, snapping him out of the haze. Marcus. Of course. Darius stared at the screen for a moment before answering. What? He said flatly. Marcus's voice came through smooth, confident. Just checking on you, Big Bro figured you might still be processing yesterday. Darius leaned back in his chair. I'm good. Pause. Then Marcus chuckled softly. You sure? I know that couldn't have been easy. But hey, life moves on, right? The audacity. Darius clenched his jaw but kept his tone steady. Yeah, he said. It does. Another pause. Longer this time. Listen, Marcus continued. I'm hosting a small dinner tonight. Family. Thought you should come. Clear the air. Darius smiled faintly, though Marcus couldn't see it. Yeah, he said. I'll be there. After the call ended, the silence returned, but it felt different now. Sharper. Focused. Darius looked back at the documents, then at the envelope his father had left. What you do with this defines who you are. He stood up slowly, gathering a few key files and slipping them into a separate folder. This wasn't going to be emotional. Not anymore. This was strategy. Precision. Marcus thought he had already won. Thought the game was over. But tonight, Darius was going to show him something else entirely. Because the truth wasn't loud. It didn't argue. It didn't beg. It waited. And when it finally surfaced, it destroyed everything in its path. Marcus's dinner was exactly what Darius expected, and somehow worse. The brownstone was alive again, filled with warm lighting, soft music, and carefully curated normalcy. Laughter echoed through rooms that had felt like a battlefield just days earlier. It was all performance. Every detail. Every smile. And Marcus stood at the center of it all, playing his role flawlessly. There he is. Marcus called out as Darius stepped inside. Thought you might ghost us. Darius removed his coat slowly. Not my style, he replied. Renee stood near the dining table, her expression tense but observant. She knew something was off. She just didn't know what. Marcus handed Darius a drink. Peace offering, he said lightly. Darius accepted it but didn't sip. You always did like to smooth things over after breaking them, he said quietly. Marcus laughed, brushing it off. Come on, man. Don't start. Dinner began soon after, conversation flowing around the table like nothing had changed. But beneath it all, tension simmered. Darius watched Marcus carefully, the way he spoke, the way he controlled the room, the way he deflected anything that got too close to the truth. It was calculated. Every move. Halfway through the meal, Marcus raised his glass. To family, he said. Even when things get complicated. Glasses clinked. Darius didn't raise his. He just watched. Then slowly he reached into his jacket and placed a single document on the table. Since we're being honest tonight, he said calmly, I brought something too. The room fell silent. Marcus's smile faltered just for a second. But Darius saw it. And that was all he needed. Because for the first time that night, Marcus wasn't in control. What's this supposed to be? Marcus asked, his tone still steady but his eyes sharper now, scanning the paper without touching it. Darius leaned back slightly, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Go ahead, he said. Read it. Marcus hesitated. That alone said everything. But eventually he reached forward, picking up the document with controlled precision. As his eyes moved across the page, something changed. Subtle but undeniable. The room felt it. The shift. Renee leaned forward. Marcus, she asked quietly. He didn't answer immediately. Instead he placed the paper back down carefully, his jaw tightening just slightly. Where'd you get this? He asked. Darius didn't blink. Does it matter? A beat. Then Marcus laughed, but it didn't land the same this time. You think this proves something? He said. It's incomplete. Darius nodded slowly. Yeah, he replied. It is. Then he reached into his jacket again and pulled out a second document. Then a third. Each one placed on the table with deliberate calm. But these don't leave much room for interpretation. The room went still. Completely still. Marcus looked down again, this time faster, his composure cracking at the edges. This is nonsense, he said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. Darius leaned forward now, his eyes locked on his brother. Offshore accounts, he said quietly. Shell companies. Transfers over 3 years. All tied back to you. Someone gasped softly. Renee covered her mouth. Marcus. Darius didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You didn't just take what Dad left, he continued. You've been taking it. Marcus looked up then, and for the first time all night the mask slipped completely. And what was underneath wasn't calm. It was panic. You don't know what you're talking about, Marcus snapped suddenly, the calm facade collapsing under pressure. His voice was louder now, sharper, cutting through the room. You think a couple papers make you smart? Darius didn't react. He just watched him. Studied him. Nah, he said quietly. I think patterns make me smart. Marcus stood up abruptly, pushing his chair back. This is ridiculous, he said. You're trying to embarrass me in my own house? Darius stood too, but slower, controlled. No, he replied. I'm giving you a chance. Marcus laughed bitterly. A chance for what? Darius held his gaze. To tell the truth before it tells itself. Silence hit the room like a wave. Heavy. Suffocating. Marcus looked around, seeing the faces now, family members who weren't laughing anymore, weren't comfortable anymore. Doubt had entered the room. And doubt was dangerous. You think they are going to believe you? Marcus said, but there was something different in his voice now. Uncertainty. Darius reached into his jacket one last time and pulled out a flash drive. Small. Simple. Devastating. Bank logs. Recorded calls. Full transaction history, he said. Everything. Marcus froze. Just for a second, but it was enough. Darius stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Marcus could hear. Dad knew, he said. He just wanted to see if you'd stop. Marcus's eyes flickered, shocked, then something darker. You don't understand. No, Darius cut him off. You don't. He stepped back, addressing the room now. This isn't about inheritance, he said. This is about betrayal. And as silence settled once again, one thing became clear. The night Marcus thought would secure his victory had just become the beginning of his downfall. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument could have been. It settled over the room like thick smoke, choking out every last trace of comfort. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, then slowly straightened his jacket as if composure alone could undo what had just been exposed. "Y'all really going to sit here and let him spin this?" he said, forcing a laugh that didn't land. No one responded. That was the first real shift. Darius noticed it immediately, the way people avoided Marcus's eyes now, the way doubt had replaced loyalty. Renee stood up slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Marcus, just tell us the truth." Marcus's head snapped toward her. "You too?" he asked, disbelief creeping into his tone. Darius stepped forward, calm and controlled. "It's over," he said quietly. "You can keep lying, but it won't change what's already documented." Marcus's jaw tightened, his eyes darting around the room like he was searching for an exit that didn't exist. "You don't understand how this works," he muttered. "I built things you don't even know about." Darius nodded slightly. "Yeah," he said. "That's the problem." A long pause followed. Then Marcus exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. For a second, just a second, he looked tired. Not defeated, but exposed. "You think Dad didn't know what I was doing?" he said finally, his voice lower now. "He knew." The words landed hard. Darius frowned slightly. "No," he said. "He suspected." Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, he knew." That changed everything. The room leaned in without realizing it. And suddenly this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about something deeper. Something their father had allowed to play out, for reasons Darius was only beginning to understand. "What are you talking about?" Darius asked, his voice tightening for the first time since the confrontation began. Marcus let out a slow breath, then pulled out a chair and sat down like the weight of everything had finally caught up with him. "You think I just woke up one day and started moving money?" he said. "Nah, it started years ago." The room stayed silent, every word now pulling them deeper into something none of them expected. "Dad came to me first," Marcus continued. "Said the company was bleeding. Bad decisions. Old contracts. People he trusted were costing him millions." Darius frowned. "He never said anything to me." Marcus looked up at him. "Exactly." That stung. "He didn't trust you with it," Marcus added quietly. Darius's jaw clenched, but he didn't interrupt. "He asked me to fix it," Marcus went on. Quietly. "Off the books. Said if I could turn things around, I'd prove I was ready to take over." The room shifted again, confusion replacing certainty. "So yeah," Marcus said, leaning forward slightly. "I started moving money. Creating accounts. Making moves he couldn't make publicly." Darius shook his head slowly. "That doesn't explain this," he said, gesturing to the documents. Marcus laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "It does," he said. "Because somewhere along the way, I realized something." He paused. Looked directly at Darius. "I was better at it than him." The words hung in the air like a confession disguised as pride. "And once I saw how easy it was," Marcus continued, his voice dropping, "I stopped fixing things for him and started building something for myself." A quiet gasp came from across the table. Darius stared at him, something cold settling deep in his chest. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was evolution. And Marcus had crossed a line he never planned to come back from. "So you're admitting it," Darius said, his voice steady but colder now, sharper than before. Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, studying the room like he was recalculating everything in real time. "I'm saying you don't understand the full picture," he replied finally. "There is no bigger picture," Darius shot back. "You stole from your own father." Marcus shook his head. "No," he said. "I outgrew him." That sentence landed harder than anything else he'd said all night. Renee stepped back slightly, shaking her head. "That's not growth," she whispered. "That's betrayal." Marcus looked at her, then back at Darius. "You think he was some kind of saint?" he asked. "You think Holloway Logistics was built clean?" Darius didn't answer, but his silence said enough. Marcus leaned forward again, his tone intensifying. "Dad made deals you don't know about. Cut corners. Moved money where it didn't belong. I just did it smarter." The room was unraveling now, truth and justification colliding in real time. Darius exhaled slowly, grounding himself. Even if that was true, he said, that don't give you the right to take everything. Marcus's expression hardened again. I didn't take it, he replied. I earned it. Darius shook his head. Nah, he said quietly. You manipulated it. The two brothers stared at each other, years of unspoken tension finally surfacing. You always thought you were the one holding things together, Marcus continued. But you were just maintaining. I built something bigger. Darius stepped closer now, his voice low but firm. You built it on lies. Pause. Then Marcus smirked slightly. That's how everything gets built. And in that moment, Darius understood something critical. Marcus wasn't sorry. Not even close. And that meant one thing. This wasn't going to end with confession. It was going to end with consequences. Darius stepped back slowly, letting the weight of Marcus's words settle, not just in the room but inside himself. This wasn't just about money anymore. It wasn't even about inheritance. It was about identity. About who they had become and who their father had quietly shaped them to be. You really believe that? Darius asked finally. That all of this makes you right? Marcus didn't hesitate. It makes me prepared, he replied. Darius nodded once, absorbing that. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Good, he said. Marcus frowned slightly. Good for what? Darius held his gaze. Because preparation works both ways. He tapped the screen once, then turned it so Marcus could see. A recording. Time-stamped. Clear. Marcus's earlier words, his admissions, playing back in perfect clarity. The room shifted again, tension snapping tighter than before. Marcus's expression changed instantly. Not panic. Not yet. But recognition. You recorded me? He asked quietly. Darius didn't blink. I prepared, he said simply. Marcus let out a slow breath, leaning back again, but this time, there was no confidence left in the movement. Just calculation. Fast. Desperate. You think that's enough? He asked. Darius nodded slightly. It's a start. Renee stepped forward, her voice stronger now. Marcus, this is serious. He looked at her but didn't respond. His mind was elsewhere now, racing. Darius stepped closer one final time, lowering his voice. You still got a choice, he said. You can keep fighting, or you can stop before this gets worse. Marcus's eyes flickered just for a second. Then he smiled again. But this time, it didn't reach his eyes. Too late for that, he said. And in that moment, Darius realized something chilling. Marcus wasn't backing down. He was preparing for something else entirely. The room hadn't moved, but everything inside it had shifted. Marcus stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor in a sound that felt louder than it should have. You really think this ends tonight? He asked, his voice calm again but colder now. Controlled. Darius didn't answer immediately. He was watching Marcus carefully now, not just what he said but how he moved, how he thought. No, Darius said finally. I think this is where it starts. Marcus nodded slightly, almost approving. Good, he said. Because you're not the only one who prepared. That sentence landed with quiet weight. Darius's eyes narrowed slightly. What does that mean? Marcus didn't answer directly. Instead, he glanced around the room at the family, at the tension, at the fragile balance that was already breaking. It means, he said slowly, you should have opened everything your father left you, not just the parts you understood. Darius felt something shift again, sharp, immediate. The duffel bag. The files. The letter. Had he missed something? Marcus stepped closer now, lowering his voice just enough. Dad didn't just test me, he said. He tested you too. Darius held his ground, but inside questions were forming fast. Dangerous questions. Marcus smiled faintly, stepping back again. You think you got the full story, he added. But you don't. The silence that followed wasn't confusion anymore. It was anticipation. Something bigger was coming. Darius could feel it. And for the first time since finding the locker, uncertainty crept in. Because if Marcus was right, if there was more he hadn't seen, then this wasn't just a confrontation. It was a deeper game. One their father had started long before either of them realized. And now, it was far from over. Darius didn't respond right away. He stood there, still and controlled, but inside his mind was moving fast, replaying every detail, Every item in the duffel bag, every word in his father's letter. Locker 317. Trust no one, not even blood. He had assumed that warning pointed only at Marcus. Now he wasn't so sure. What did I miss? Darius asked quietly. Marcus smiled slightly, like he had been waiting for that question. That's the problem, he said. You don't even know what you're looking for. Darius's jaw tightened, but he didn't react emotionally. He turned, grabbing his coat from the chair. We're done here, he said calmly. Renee stepped forward. Darius, not now, he replied, his tone firm but not harsh. His focus had shifted completely. This wasn't about proving Marcus wrong anymore. This was about understanding the full game. And his father had clearly been playing one. As Darius walked toward the door, Marcus's voice followed him. You better move fast, he said. Darius stopped but didn't turn. Why? Marcus's smirk deepened. Because not everything in that bag is meant to protect you. A chill ran through Darius, subtle but real. Then he stepped out into the night without another word. The cold air hit him again, sharper this time, like reality catching up. He moved quickly to his car, his mind already dissecting possibilities. Hidden files. Encoded information. Something he had overlooked. His father wasn't careless. If there was more, it was there for a reason. And if Marcus knew about it, that meant one thing. The game wasn't just between them anymore. It had layers. Traps. Conditions. Darius started the engine, gripping the wheel tightly. Whatever he missed, he needed to find it. No. Back in his apartment, Darius moved with urgency. The duffel bag sat exactly where he had left it, but now it felt different, less like evidence, more like a puzzle box he had only partially opened. He emptied everything onto the table again, this time slower, more methodical. Folders. Drives. Documents. He checked every corner, every seam, and every hidden compartment. Nothing new until he picked up the wristwatch his father had left. He had dismissed it earlier. Just a sentimental item. But now he paused. The weight felt slightly off. He turned it over, studying the back carefully. There barely visible a small engraving. Turn what time hides. Darius frowned, then pressed along the edge. A soft click followed. The back panel loosened slightly. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered under his breath. Inside the watch was a microslot. And inside that, a thin memory chip. Darius stared at it, his pulse picking up again. This was it. The missing piece. He rushed to his laptop, inserting the chip carefully. For a moment nothing happened. Then files appeared. Encrypted at first glance. But one stood out. A video file. Darius hesitated only briefly before opening it. The screen flickered, then stabilized. And suddenly his father was there. Sitting in his study. Looking directly into the camera. If you're watching this, Darius, Elijah Holloway said calmly, then you finally looked deeper. Darius leaned forward slowly, his entire focus locked in. Because whatever came next wasn't just information. It was intention. Elijah Holloway leaned back slightly in the video, his expression calm but deliberate, the kind of calm that came from knowing exactly how things would unfold. I couldn't stop Marcus the way I wanted to, he said. Not without destroying everything I built. Darius felt his chest tighten as he listened. So I made a different decision, his father continued. I let him think he was winning. The words landed heavy. Marcus believes power comes from control, money, influence, leverage. And in a way he's right. But what he doesn't understand is that real power comes from timing. Darius's eyes narrowed slightly, absorbing every word. Everything you found in that bag is only part of it, Elijah said. The rest is already in motion. Pause. Then his father leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. 3 days before my death, I transferred controlling oversight of Holloway Logistics into a conditional trust. Not to Marcus. Darius's breath caught. To you. Silence filled the apartment, but the video continued. The condition is simple, Elijah said. If evidence of internal fraud surfaces, and it will, Marcus loses everything. Immediately. Darius leaned back slowly, the realization hitting him in waves. The evidence you hold activates that clause, Elijah added. But only if it's presented correctly. Through the right channels. Darius exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face. This wasn't just protection. This was strategy layered over time. His father hadn't ignored Marcus's betrayal. He had designed its collapse. What you do next, Elijah said, his voice steady, decides not just your future but his. The screen went dark. And in the silence that followed, everything finally made sense. Darius sat there for a long moment, the weight of everything settling into something sharper than anger clarity. This was never about choosing sides. It was about choosing responsibility. His father hadn't handed him revenge. He had handed him control, conditional, precise, and earned. Darius stood slowly, gathering the documents again, but this time with intention. He knew exactly what to do. The next morning Marcus received a call. Not from Darius, but from the firm that handled Holloway Logistics' legal oversight. By noon, emergency proceedings had begun. Financial irregularities flagged. Internal audits triggered. Accounts frozen. By evening, Marcus was sitting in a conference room, surrounded not by family but by attorneys. "We need you to explain these transactions," one of them said, sliding a file across the table. Marcus flipped through it, his expression tightening with each page. "Where is this coming from?" he demanded. The attorney didn't answer directly. "We have sufficient evidence to initiate full control review under the conditional trust," he said. "Effective immediately." That was the moment it hit. Not slowly. Not subtly. Completely. Marcus leaned back, his mind racing, but this time there was no angle. No manipulation left. Just consequences. Later that night, Darius stood outside the brownstone again, the same place where everything had started, but this time it felt different. Still heavy. But clear. Marcus walked out hours later, his posture different now. Not defeated, but stripped of certainty. He stopped when he saw Darius. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Marcus exhaled slowly. "You really went through with it?" Darius nodded once. "I didn't start it," he said quietly. "But I'm finishing it." Marcus looked at him, really looked this time. And for the first time, there was no arrogance left. Just understanding. Weeks later the dust had settled, but the impact remained. Holloway Logistics stood intact, now under Darius's control, stabilized and rebuilt with transparency his father had once only hinted at. The investigations confirmed everything. Marcus hadn't just crossed a line, he had buried himself beyond it. Legal consequences followed, quiet but firm. No dramatic downfall. Just a steady unraveling of everything he thought he had secured. Darius didn't celebrate. There was no victory in it. Only resolution. One evening he stood inside his father's study, the same room from the video. The air still carried that faint scent of cedar and bourbon. He picked up the wristwatch, turning it in his hand before slipping it onto his wrist. It fit perfectly. "You planned all of this," he murmured softly. Not with resentment but with understanding. His father hadn't chosen one son over the other. He had created a path and let them reveal who they truly were by how they walked it. Darius stepped toward the window, looking out over the city. The weight was still there, but it was different now. Grounded. Earned. And as the night settled in, one truth became clear. Power built on deception always collapses under its own weight. But power built on discipline, patience, and truth lasts. Darius exhaled slowly, his reflection steady in the glass. "Family isn't just blood," he said quietly. "It's accountability." And somewhere beneath that realization was something deeper. Not revenge. Not even justice. Growth. Because in the end what his father left behind wasn't just a company. It was a test. And Darius had finally passed it.
Thank you for watching till the end. In the end, their father didn't choose him. He tested both of them. And the truth? He was never meant to lose. Because some legacies are not given. They are earned. If you felt this story, kindly subscribe for more.